Today is a really big day. I just launched the Creator at Large podcast. It's my first podcast ever, and since this series storyline is all about my creative journey, I wanted to talk a bit about the process of launching this podcast. So in 2015, I had been getting into comics since about 2010, 2011. And I had learned a lot about it. I had started working in marketing, and I felt there was a lot lacking in the comic book industry, especially when it came to the marketing and business side. I was just a little frustrated with the lack of innovation, and I really enjoyed the conversations that I would have with my fellow creators at cons about this topic. But those conversations only occurred at conventions, and even though I attended quite a few, it still just didn't feel like quite enough for me. So I started a website called Creator at Large, where I wrote weekly posts about the business of comics and about my ideas for marketing. And the idea was not and is not to pass myself off as an expert. I was and still am learning, but I'm trying to apply a different perspective to the comic industry, one that I think a lot of creators are actually coming around the importance of independent comics for creators and how you don't really need to break in, you don't need to wait for permission to become a creator today. You can actually go out there and do it independently and make it on your own. And the website was successful. I still have it, I still kind of maintain it. But it grows on its own now. I don't really post on it anymore. I haven't posted on it in a long time, really, because I've just been busy with other things. And so once it got to a certain point, as I kept getting distracted, I stopped really doing as much with it, and I didn't take it as far as I think I could have. And that's always been a bit of a regret of mine these last few years. It's always been a little bit frustrating to know that I think I could have just done more with this project. I think there's a lot of information out there, and I don't have all the answers, but I could have gone out and asked and found the answers for people and returned the results back on this website for people to dive into. So I decided to finally commit to doing this, and a few months ago, back around June, I had this lingering idea about doing this podcast that I've had for years now, and decided to say, you know what, I'm just actually going to do it. And it took a couple months. It took a couple months to, put together a list of guests and reach out to people and learn how to record audio well and actually produce and edit a podcast and start going through this whole process. But now, in September 18th, earlier today, I got an email from iTunes saying that my podcast was approved. Now it's on Spotify, it's on Google, you can hear it on Amazon Echo, it's all over the place. And so this podcast is done and it's out there now, and it feels really, really cool. Honestly, I was super nervous this morning before sharing the podcast, and now I've put it out online, and it hasn't had a whole ton of downloads. It didn't go completely viral or anything, but it feels so good to get something out there and to not let myself be restricted by the insecurities that I feel and the nervousness of sharing something new. I think that I'm just so worried about putting myself and being honest about the position that I'm in as far as just not having all the answers and trying to figure them out, because we live in a culture where online everyone tries to present the absolute best version of themselves, even if it's not always the most honest truth about themselves, and I just don't want to do that. So with this podcast, I don't have to pretend to be an expert. There are things that I know and understand better than other people, but there's plenty about the industry that I'm still learning and figuring out, and this podcast has been really great in teaching me a lot about how other professionals who are making an impact in comics are thinking about things. And since I've been learning a lot too, I really think it's going to be really valuable to people listening. And hopefully, if you're interested in the comic industry, you'll go and listen and check it out. There's going to be a link probably at the top of the description that'll take you to the podcast, or you can search Creator at Large on just about anywhere and find it. But like I said earlier, I was just a little frozen with this fear that people wouldn't like it, or people would think it's just mediocre. But now it's only been a few hours since I kind of hit send and have started to promote the podcast and try to get as many people to listen to it as possible. But I already feel so much better. The fulfillment of making something and of getting it out there is so much better than the fear of making something mediocre. And I would say it's even better than the likely reality of not making something great, because this is my first podcast. You know, I've got like my rig here that does all right, and I'm starting, oh, well, there it goes. I'm starting to figure it out and try to understand how to make podcasts well, but nobody starts out as an expert, and so I know that there's still going to be a long way for me to go. I still have a lot to learn here, and it just feels so good to be making things, to be releasing things. I talk a lot about how writing just takes so long, and so this is just another one of those things, like making these videos, where I can kind of get that immediate gratification of getting something made a lot faster. And now I'm going to be doing a new podcast episode every Tuesday. I'm making a new YouTube video every Friday, and I've been doing that for a few months now, and I'm just really excited about what that means. You know, it's almost 4 years now since I started Creator at Large, and there's this great saying that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the second best time is now, and I feel that. It would have been awesome for me to start the Creator at Large podcast right when I launched, and I'm sure it would have been in a different place, and I would have been able to do so much more with it and grow it to another spot. But I think there's still that need for conversation about the business of comics, because that's what the show is all about. There just aren't those conversations, and I'm hoping that this podcast can really be a good place for it and get people interested and educated about the business of the comic book industry, whether they want to work in it as a professional or whether they're creators who need to educate themselves on that side so they can actually have and build an independent living for themselves. So if you're at all interested in the comic book industry, please go check it out. Go on iTunes, go wherever you listen to podcasts. I use Overcast. Overcast is an awesome app. Search for the Creator at Large podcast and download one of the episodes that looks interesting to you. There's 3 up right now. I uploaded and started with 3 episodes with 3 different people who are really great and have very different perspectives and histories within the comic book industry. So yeah, so if you're interested, go check it out. And this has been what I've been up to. This is kind of a lot of what I've been doing over the last couple months. It's one of the many projects I've been working on. And it's nice to just have something out there and launching, and maybe in future episodes of this series of Storyline, we'll dive into how it's progressing, and, you know, I'll check in with you then. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys next Friday. Oh, and yeah, if you were expecting a D&D video, I'm trying to make those pretty regularly. I obviously don't want that to be the only thing that I'm doing, but if there's other stuff that I can make videos about, I just want to share about this whole creative process and all the different things that I'm dipping my toes into and trying to figure out. So if you want to follow along this whole journey of telling stories across a whole bunch of different mediums, subscribe to this channel. Like I said, new video every Friday. Thanks. See you next week.